Hello again and welcome back to the Decision Makers podcast. I'm Hugh Woozencroft, joined once again by Marlon Fleischmann, Managing Director, co-owner at Unique Sports Group, and the former Hull City, Birmingham City, Sierra Leone defender, Curtis Davies is here as well for another fantastic episode. We've got our headphones on, by the way, because very, very shortly we'll be joined by a very busy man, Andros Townsend, the former Spurs and England wide man, will be helping us to discuss Lone Rangers. What do I mean by that? Well, those players who make a move from a club to somewhere maybe they weren't expecting to be. If they want a little bit of game time, fitness development, maybe a young player looking to start their career. And we'll discuss what kind of stress that places on a player, on their family, on their agents as well over the course of the next hour or so. So Curtis, I'm going to start with you around a player's motivations for going on loan, because I guess we all just go, well, they need to play, so that's why they go on loan. But there are many reasons to actually, take 6 months, maybe a season somewhere else.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it and you touched on it there. Kickstart. That's the initial thoughts. A young player like an Andros, when you're at a team like Tottenham, it's not that easy to get into the first team so young. So obviously you have to go out, you have to earn your stripes in league football and then come back and fight for your place, which is what he did. But I'd like to mention the other side of it, which is the restart side as well, which is what I had. Whilst I was young, I was at a club like Luton Town where you actually are pushed into the first team rather than go on loan to then get yourself in the first team. And I was fortunate enough to go that route. But halfway through my career, I had a slight stop. When I was at Aston Villa, I'd got an injury to my shoulder, which meant that I was going to be out for 3 months. From there, after having that injury, the club had signed James Collins and Richard Dunn. I kind of looked at it and looked at myself. Realistically, I'm not going to get back in the team. I looked at it, fourth choice, fifth choice, whatever. So I was kind of like, all right, let me go on loan to get myself going again. I went and presented a couple of offers that I'd had from Celtic and Wigan to Martin O'Neill and said that I just want to go on loan to get myself going again so I can come back next year and fight for my place. That was rejected, and I was told that I was going to be part of it. So whilst I was disappointed that I couldn't go on loan, I was like, well, actually, I'm going to play. Lo and behold, I didn't play. I was left out of squads and stuff like that for the rest of the season. And that started, which ended up being a year in the wilderness with me. A new manager came in Gerard Houllier, had similar things happening in terms of I'd train with the first team, yes, but wouldn't be involved. I think a little bit of politics to do with my contract, and if I'd played more games, they'd pay West Brom more money, stuff like that. But nobody said anything to me. If they say that, that's fine. We sort it out. But yeah, in the end, I ended up playing a League Cup game where I came on late on in the game, got a big header, ended up getting an assist for a goal, blah, blah, blah. The manager came to me, Gerard Houllier, and said to me, oh, I haven't had a look at you. He said, but now, after the way I saw you come into the game yesterday, you were really on it, you were ready, you weren't crying, you weren't sulking. I'm going to make sure I keep you really close to the team. And I was like, oh gosh, my Villa career might be back on track now and it might be, time to kick on again. And lo and behold, that was, I think, the Thursday or something like that. The squad goes up for the travelling party and I'm not in it. So he was keeping me that close that I was staying at home, watching it at home. So from that, I said to my agent, I said, that's enough. I have to go on loan. I have to get out of it just to get a new environment. And fortunately for me, Sven Goran Eriksson rang the club and asked me by name. And from there, it's the most I've enjoyed my football ever. I said, because I went there with an England manager that obviously highly respected. And all he said to me was, express yourself. So from that, and that short 3 months that I had there, it just rebooted my whole career and made me love football again. So whilst actually the playing side of it, in terms of just being on the pitch and being able to show the world you've got a bit, just the mentality side of it and being in a new environment is sometimes so important. And that's what it did for me. It just made me love football again. So I did end up going back to Aston Villa, but then was meant to go on loan to Leicester again. And I ended up signing for Birmingham off the back of what I did for Leicester. So I think it is important in the early stages, but also when you have those kind of stuttering parts of your career, it's not the worst thing to do.
That sounds pretty common, but I guess we'll explore it in more detail. It certainly is a situation that worked out for you as a player. Let's bring in our guest, Andros Townsend, former Spurs and England wide man, of course, now playing with Antalyaspor out in Turkey. Andros, firstly, how are you? Enjoying life?
I'm very good. I'm enjoying life. I'm back in the UK for the international break, but all good my end.
Listen, we just heard Curtis's story about going on loan, which was kind of mid-career, mid-20s. Wasn't mid-career for you by the end, mid-20s for most players maybe. You went on loan a lot, quite famously, early on in your career when you were at Tottenham Hotspur to 9 different clubs. So Curtis was telling us about restarting his career. You had, I guess, the experience of kickstarting your career. What was that like?
It was something that needed to be done. At the time, Spurs were fighting for Champions League football. They had Aaron Lennon on one wing and Gareth Bale on the other wing. So for me, breaking through, there wasn't many opportunities. So for me, I had to utilize the loan route until it got to a stage where I was showcasing myself in the Premier League. And that's when I really got my chance at Spurs. But I knew that it was the loan route for the first 3 or 4 years before I could fully showcase myself.
Marlon, we heard Curtis say that he called his agent when he was in a situation that he felt wasn't working for him. You obviously worked with Andros, very young player who needed to develop in their game and get that first team experience as well. So how does it work from your point of view? Those two things. You've got a player that you want to get the experience. You've got a player calling you saying, get me out of here. I need to play some football.
There's two different views on this. Okay, one is from the younger player view, and one's from, as Curtis mentioned before, someone who's already broken through and already playing. What Andros said before is, and what he alluded to is, how are you going to break into your parent club? If they're competing at the top level, is the manager going to turn to a 17-year-old, 18-year-old to get in that team when the risks or the trust isn't quite there? So the loan route for the younger players starts from both the player having an awareness to say, look, I've done all I can do in the 21s. I can't do any more, and I may be travelling, but I'm not getting the minutes. From our side as the agent, we're aware of that, and we don't want to see a player's development stalling or being stuck in the 21s for years on end or never getting the chance. So I think it's very quick to discuss with the club at the right time. Look, what is the career path for a 17-year-old Andros at that stage? Can you guarantee minutes? If you can't, then it's not good enough. He has to go and play. And then we're going to go and source clubs by which gives Andros the platform to go and showcase his talents, and which he did so superbly, to go and push on into the first team.
So many things converging just in that answer. Because I wanted to talk about how it's communicated with a player that they're going on loan and where they're going on loan possibly as well. And it's interesting that you said that you had to source clubs to try and come in for one of your young players to take them on loan. But also, of course, someone like you, Curtis, you might have clubs coming in wanting to take you on loan. You mentioned Leicester City as well. Maybe a young player like Andros when he was at Spurs, is he saying to you, where am I going? Is he putting pressure on you to go to particular clubs? How did it all work?
I think Andros was
Laugh says it all.
Pressure? No pressure applied, not much. Look, ultimately, you're in a partnership with your client, right? And you both want the same thing. You both want your player playing, and you want your player to be happy. If he's getting no minutes, that's not good for anyone. And it's also not actually good for the club, because you just got an asset sitting there going nowhere. In terms of finding the clubs, the agent and the player will go, look, we have an idea of the level we think we should be playing at, and we're going to try and find solutions. Clubs may already have registered interest with the parent club, but just because you've registered interest doesn't quite mean you're playing maybe the right system, or you're the right manager, or you're the right instability of a football club that's going to be beneficial to a young player arriving on an early loan. There are things that, and Andros would probably allude to, when you're a younger player and going on loan, there's different things you're not used to, as opposed to Curtis going on loan when you've already been in that first team environment and the demands of that.
What was it like for you, Andros? Those 9 different loans, all those different players you played with, managers, changing rooms, but also, of course, for the first time maybe in your life, you're out on your own and really having to take that responsibility in your career.
So many different experiences. The first one, 17, went on loan to Yeovil, and that was a complete culture shock. That was the first time I'd been away from home, been by myself, having to fend for myself. the club was in a relegation battle fighting for their lives. So that was a real eye-opener to men's football at such a young age. Then I skip forward to Ipswich, for example, under Roy Keane. Again, the club was struggling, and initially I was playing, and then he came to me and said, listen, I love you, you're a good player, but at the moment you're a luxury player. If we were at the top end of the table, you'd be playing week in, week out, but we're fighting for our lives, and unfortunately we can't have a player like yourself. And then Leeds, which was, I think, the first time I had a manager get sacked, or the manager that brought me in got sacked. Then the caretaker manager didn't really fancy me, didn't start any of his 3 games in charge. And then myself and Marlon had decided that the time was right to cut my loan short and go to Birmingham, who were also interested. And in the meantime, Neil Warnock had come in before I'd managed to leave. Neil Warnock had come in, said he loves me, said he wants me to stay, said I'm going to play. But I'd already told Chris Hooton I'd go to Birmingham. So it was like getting myself out of the Leeds one as amicably as possible, and then taking myself to Birmingham. And myself and Marlon had to shoulder the blame for all of that. The club wouldn't help me, and Marlon had to kind of take that on the chin. So there are so many different experiences in those 9 loans that have standed me in good stead for my senior career, whether that be at Spurs or Palace or wherever else I went after that.
A little bit tricky, Marlon. Roy Keane, Neil Warnock, all those big clubs as well. You know, they are very powerful institutions. You might have upset one or two.
I think in football you upset people all the time, don't you? You have to keep going.
You got to look after your client. That's it. You're going to have to upset people. If your client's happy at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing that matters. You represent the client, not the club. And ultimately, you did the job for Andros.
And I'll come to Andros on this as well. How do you take care of a young player that's gone out on loan? You know, he is being put into a number of different environments. He is still a young man finding his feet in the world, let alone an industry like professional football as well. What support do they get?
I think it's different. It's different by which club they're leaving. Some clubs, maybe not back in the day, but now have really good loan managers and support things in place. They never had that before. But if you're going on a first loan, and Andros mentioned it there, some of these players are leaving home for the first time. They're young guys. We go back to players being human. Okay, you leave home for the first time. You've got to cook for yourself. You've got to clean for yourself. You've got to live. And I think as an agent, you have to, before the player goes on loan, open their eyes to what it's really going to be like. And, you know, you also hope that the club they're going to on loan looks after them, has player liaison officers that can help with accommodation, and you're there supporting in the background, try and do as much as you can do. But, and it's the important thing, you can't mollycoddle the situation. You need the player to stand on their own 2 feet and grow. So if you put everything on a plate, they're not going to take that experience that will put you in good stead going forward. So you can't do everything, but you can certainly prepare them.
What was the hardest thing, Andros, about being on loan as a young man?
It was quite easy for me because I had no baggage. I had no missus. I had no kids. I had no home of my own. I had no base. In a way, it was quite easy, probably in the sense of having to adapt to a different culture that I was used to, and getting thrown into an environment where these players were fighting for their lives, fighting for contracts, fighting for their careers, and there was me, this flashy winger from Spurs who just wanted to do step overs and shoot all day. So that was probably the only real difficulty there. Other than that, it's the easy stage because, like I said, you got no real baggage.
When it comes to sending a player out on loan, there are negotiations, aren't there? Is it like a permanent deal when it comes to sending a player out on loan, or is it smoother in a way? You're so keen for your player to just get out, get some game time, that the contract carries over from the club that they're at? How does it all work?
Yeah, so the player stays on their existing contract at the parent club, but there are areas that, as the agent, you would need to negotiate on top of that. Who's paying for the accommodation? Is the player, we should be getting match bonuses and appearance bonuses as per the players at the loan club are getting. So there are areas where you need to negotiate on top of the player's contract. There are areas as well where you would negotiate a higher salary point or bonus payments Because if that player is going into a first team environment and pushing that team on, he should be paid as a first team player in that environment.
I remember when myself and Marlon were driving to Millwall, and like I said again at the time, it wasn't about money for me. It wasn't about anything. I just needed to play football, and we were driving to Millwall, and I remember the Burnley manager text saying, we'd double his wages if he'll come to us. But for me, at the time, Millwall was the right footballing opportunity because I just had an unsuccessful loan at Watford. So to take double your money and maybe not play in a team that's pushing for the playoff didn't really appeal to me. So yeah, these are just some of the negotiations that can go on when you're going out on loan as well.
I think that's one of the big differences between the permanent and the loan. It's you're going on loan because there's a necessity to go on loan. There's a requirement, there's a need. And that need generally is minutes. And you know that you don't want to lose the opportunity for minutes because of a financial situation, which actually what you're arguing over is done in 6 months. It's to put you in a position to get a bigger leverage and higher numbers further down the line once you've got those minutes under your belt. So that's a big difference between a permanent and a loan.
I just wanted to ask you about a loan list. Does that exist? Do clubs send around a message to other clubs saying, listen, if you want a player, short-term deal, these are the ones we're hoping to move on?
Yeah, they do. Yeah? Because there's loan managers now. There's a whole role within the football organisation that was never there before, purely there because they understand that actually the days of just having young players around the building doesn't serve anyone. They need to go out on loan. But there's still a role for, just because a club find a loan, doesn't mean it's the right loan.
I think it's always an interesting thing about Tottenham and the way they used to do it as well was before they send a player on loan, they make sure that they sign another year. So for instance, when I did go to Leicester, Kyle Norton had to sign another year at Tottenham. So therefore, he's not going into his last year and having a loan spell and able to go on a free. No, they protect the asset. So it's whilst you're sending this player on loan, you're not only getting him game time that might see him come into your first team, you're also giving him a market that come the end of this loan season, if he's not to be in your first team, you've got a value on him to sell him. And that's the big thing now. And especially with talking about PSR and stuff like that now, with young homegrown players, that's value, that's key to it now.
Good for Spurs, not necessarily good for a player who's thinking possibly in 12 months, I'm going to be on a free so I can get myself a decent contract. More clubs might be interested at me if I'm on a free as well. But obviously I want to play this year. I want to get that game time before I go somewhere else, and I want to show clubs what I can do. So it's good for Tottenham that you sign a new deal. What's the pressure like?
It's give and take, okay, because the club will protect their asset. But if you don't sign the 1 year extension and you don't play any minutes, who's to say you're in a better position?
Yeah.
But my point was going to be, do they then say, listen, if you don't sign it, you're going to stay here?
Yeah,
they do. Okay.
You stay in the 21s as a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're signing.
It depends. It really does depend on the level of the player, the experience of the player. There are times where you could run a contract down because you've done enough to go and get that move. When you're a younger player, you haven't got that CV of minutes that's going to get you that big move.
And I think just my situation, to touch on that, in my situation and the way Spurs modelled it, we're not talking about going from 2 years to 1 year. It was always, Daniel Levy would never let you get 3 years before your contract expired. So we're talking about going from a 4-year deal to a 5-year deal on slightly increased money. So it was sort of like at the time, it was a no-brainer to take the extra year, go out and play it and prove yourself that way.
Yeah.
When you sit down, Andros, with a club that you're prospectively going on loan to, what are you hoping to hear from them? I don't know who you sit down with. Is it the manager? Is it maybe a chairman? Who do you sit down with?
To be honest, back then, I think we're going back a good few years now, there wasn't really much of that. It was more done by the club and the manager and the agent. I think it's only recently that you sort of sit down with the manager and discuss it before you sign. I maybe remember Chris Hughton, because I was leaving Leeds, so I needed to have guarantees that I was going to play. And Chris Hughton gave me those guarantees. And even when I joined Birmingham, I was struggling with an injury. I played with Curtis, actually. I wasn't really playing as well as I would have liked, but Chris Hughton knew that he'd given me those promises and made sure that he played me in I think I played in all the home games, and he'd always switch it and go more defensive in the away game. So he stayed true to his word because he knew he'd promised me before I joined that to leave Leeds, where I was guaranteed under Neil Warnock to play, he needed to give me those same sort of guarantees.
You're the person, I guess, then, who would have been looking for those guarantees and assurances from a particular football club, Marlon. When it doesn't go well, this is for the parent club of your player, but also the club that you're dealing with. What's it like turning down a loan move?
Turning down a loan move, providing the reasons are genuine. And I go back to what I said before. There's almost a criteria you need to tick to find the loan move that works. And even then you can find a loan move. There's no magic formula that guarantees success on it. But you try and make it as I'm trying to think of the word. You try and build the player up to make it a success. So you will look at the playing structure and everything I've said before. To turn that down is because one of those fundamental areas or criteria doesn't work. If you are position specific, if I'm looking for a young central defender, for example, if I send him to a team that is flying at the top of the league on loan, he's sat on the bench, he's not playing, because if they're winning, they're not changing their back line. So again, all these different areas will come into the thought process as to why you may or may not turn down a loan move.
I think it's really interesting as well because you always want the right fit for your player. And more so nowadays, if you are going from a Tottenham like Andros or coming from a higher up club, you can have the pick of the bunch because usually Tottenham will supplement the wages a little bit more than other clubs maybe. But when you come down the pecking order a little bit and it's like, right, we're taking this player on loan from, say, a Championship side to League Two, then it's, yes, we do want the right fit as much as possible, but it's also where's going to take you and where's going to play you. So sometimes you have the luxury of having the right fit, having the right style of football, and then they can naturally just progress there. And other times it's almost, you have to drop a player in the deep end and it's sink or swim. And sometimes from that experience, even if it's been a horrible loan in terms of you've had to play a totally different style, you're getting beaten up every week or whatever it is, you learn from that. Then when your next one comes, it seems easy. So sometimes it's not as easy as saying, oh, we're going to find the right fit, because sometimes it's not there in League Two. If you've got an Andros that wants to do step-overs and beat people on some rubbish pitches back, do you know what I mean, 10 years ago.
Just to touch on what Curtis said as well, I probably learned the most from my unsuccessful loans. I look at Watford, where it was a week after my Spurs debut, scored, got man of the match for Spurs in the FA Cup, and then I went to Watford. I played 3 games. They sent me back after a month not because I wasn't good enough, because I didn't buy into the culture of the football club. And it was a culture of like a team spirit. So no sulkers, no bad eggs. If you're not playing, get on with it, train hard, still make jokes. And I was 19 years of age. I wasn't used to not playing. So when I wasn't playing, I was sulking. I was still training hard, but I was sulking in training. I wasn't getting involved in the banter in training and the team spirit. And that just made me realize that it wasn't just about the quality. I need to fit into these guys' culture and their way of playing as well, because they're like I said before, they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their careers. They're fighting for their contracts. They're fighting for their mortgages. Me coming in off my 5 years at Spurs and just taking the mick wouldn't work in Championship or the lower league. So from then on, I had to adapt my mentality to try and still stay professional and stay a part of it even when I wasn't playing.
I think that's an interesting point that you made in terms of about being sent back after a month. Now the loan windows are, you have to go from window to window. So there's no picking up the phone and being like, oh, we've had an injury, we're going to loan somebody. That doesn't work anymore. So in my opinion, that's what's killing young players at the moment. You've got 21-year-olds playing in the 21s. And they're being the best player every week. So what? Who cares? Whereas actually, if they're ripping up in the 21s, could they go on a month's loan, see what they can do here, see what they can do there? And I think that's the difference. Now, because you have to go window to window, Andros would have been stuck there. So Andros would have effectively been stuck there between, be it January and the end of the season. And would you have been able to get back in? Possibly. But you don't want that feeling of someone telling you you're a bad egg as soon as you've started, and then you've got to stay there for another 3 months.
I think the problem with staying at a club is twofold. One, a player may feel that actually I may get a chance. And B, like you said before, they may think there's the option on the table isn't at the level they think they should go to on loan. The hardest thing for me has been convincing players that it's actually better to leave and to go lower than maybe they want to go, and just play the minutes. And I go back to, there was a young player, Aaron Ramsey, okay, Jacob Ramsey's younger brother. We took him out on loan from Aston Villa, and we talk about players thinking it's a bad loan or didn't quite work out. He went to Cheltenham, and on paper, what he was used to doing in the 21s, assists, goals, creativity, he wasn't able to do. But all through that loan, he was sort of questioning whether he was learning anything. Was he gaining anything? Because he wasn't starting, wasn't assisting, wasn't scoring. Towards the end of the loan, he started to put some performances in. Went back to Villa thinking that it had been a bad loan move. And all the way along, I said, it's not been a bad loan move. And like Andros said before, you learn stuff. He's gone back into Aston Villa, and they're like, wow, you've changed. And he's like, what do you mean I've changed? The way he was pressing in training, the way and the intensity he was doing his running had been drilled into him from that loan spell. So he'd gone as a 21s player, but come back a first team player mentality, because he'd been immersed in that loan for so long that although he judged the success of the loan on the performance on the pitch, he gained so much from that, from when other outside of it would think it was a bad loan.
Yeah, mentality is everything as well. The amount of, I can speak about Cheltenham last year, we had, I think, 7 loan players at once, which you can only play 6, which was mad. But yeah, we had 7 loan players, and they've all come from these big clubs. You come from Arsenal, you come from Fulham, you come from Brighton, you come from all there. And I think whilst all of them were individually very talented players, you know, that they had the ability to go and play in a team, that's no problem. But mentality is something that you can only learn from being in that environment. Because as I say, like if you've been used to being the best player in your 18s, being the best player in the 21s, nothing's really a challenge. But also, it's about performance over winning. Whereas, as Andros said, when you're going to play next to the guy that this extra 300 quid is going to pay his mortgage, or it's going to pay for his daughter's birthday party, or it's going to pay for this or that, it's a totally different pressure. And when you've got someone, like I say, having a go at you because you've cost them that money rather than just be like, give me the ball, it's a totally different pressure. And a lot of them didn't really have that mentality. And that's why it's so important, in my opinion, that, like I say, I had reserve football where I learnt from, I'm playing against men, I'm playing against the likes of Paul Furlong in the reserves for Luton Town, who's a Premier League player. So I got beaten up then, and then I got the experience of first team players having a go at me, whereas now that doesn't happen. So if you don't get on loan, it's like, well, you'd been the best player in 21s, well done, but who cares?
Is that something that needs to change a little bit, Andros, do you think? A different system maybe, that we see more players go out on loan regularly, because there are so many talented, particularly at the Premier League, so many talented young players that clubs get accused of hoarding them a little bit, or maybe, and I think this has been thrown at a lot of Premier League clubs, like making them Premier League players only, so that they can't do some of the physicality stuff maybe lower down in the leagues. They don't have the same level of intensity needed to play a different style of football. Can we create a system in English football where we get those young players out into new environments earlier?
I think it goes both ways as well, especially like the young players. For some reason, when I was young, I just wanted to go and play football, whether that be in Yeovil or Leyton Orient or whoever. I just wanted to go and play football. But I don't know, I feel like youngsters don't have that same desire anymore. They want to, they prefer the comfort blanket of a nice training ground, nice food, staying at home, having everything done for them, rather than going out on a whim and making something of their career. That's just my feeling over the last 4 or 5 years speaking to youngsters. There's not that real burning desire anymore for players to go out there and prove themselves.
I think what Andros says there is totally accurate. There's not possibly that burning desire, but it's also, I've described it as getting trapped in the money. So whilst you're on loan, you're obviously still getting paid from what your parent club are giving you. But if you're, for instance, a young Chelsea player, signed a nice 5-year deal at 18 and you're on, let's just say, 10 grand a week, right? You go, you have an unsuccessful loan somewhere. Next year, you've still got another 4 or 5 years left. You go, have another unsuccessful loan, got 4 or 5 years left. But now you've got 3 years left. And you're like, need to start kicking on now. And you start working out that, okay, you've gone to this club, a little bit better, a little bit more successful at that club. Should I maybe move on and go to that next level and actually go permanently? Then You're on 10 grand a week. They've offered you 4. And then you go back, you're like, well, I'm not going to take that. I've got 3 years left on 10 grand a week at Chelsea. And then all of a sudden you stay another year, then maybe an unsuccessful loan because you've tried to go higher. And then what ends up happening is these players have gone on all these loans and had the experience of playing games, but they've been trapped in the money. So they've actually now get to a stage where they're now 24 and they're starting their career at 24 rather than the whole point of the loan was to get your career started, but they get trapped in the money. And I think that's a big symptom of more so the big clubs. I'm not going to say like the other clubs that suffer with that, but the big clubs is, yes, they're sending all these players out on loans, but the ones that kind of maybe don't have that success on loan, they end up staying at the club, playing 23s football or 21s football at their age, just because they can't leave the money that they're earning.
I think that's where the agent and the club have to work together to find a solution. No one wants to see a player drifting. And I think going back to what you said before, is there a burning desire between the younger players now to go out on loan? I think every player gets frustrated with not playing first team minutes. They may be comfortable in the environment, but they have to be pushed. If you want them to go and achieve where you believe they can play, there are times where you've got to have difficult conversations with your client and say, you may be comfortable, but actually you have to get out. You have to go and play. You have to go and prove yourself. And that's a difficult conversation as well, if they are comfortable and don't want to go out.
There's also a huge riches, possibly, if you can stay at a big club and have a good 6 months, a good season, possibly, you don't know, injuries, whatever, you get thrown into the team. You have that level of good games, particularly if you're English, and suddenly there's a 5 year, 6 year deal on the table at 70, 80,000 pounds a week. Is the lure of that, Andros, keeping certain players at big clubs?
Yes, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The one advice I always give young players who come and speak to me is always make sure you're at the big club until they don't want you no more. You can always go on loan. You can always go on another loan. What I see happen too frequently, I hope I explain myself well, is you see players who have a taste of first team football on loan, do well, that club wants to buy them permanently, and they force themselves out of a 4 or 5 year deal at a Premier League club to go and play permanently at a League One club. And what happens then when they sign permanently? They have a bad run. They're out of the team. They can't go back to that Premier League club because they've signed permanently. Then what happens is they have to go to League Two. They have to go down to the conference. And I see so many good players lost in the system just because of their desperate desire to get out permanently and like maybe even more money initially. But what I say to players, if the Premier League club wants to offer you a 4 year deal and send you out on loan, take it. Keep taking it until they don't offer you anything anymore. Then you have to go out and prove yourself permanently. But by jumping the gun and going to maybe a club who you haven't done the research fully, when it's unsuccessful, you can't call your agent saying that, yeah, it's not working, get me to the next club, because there is no next club. You have to stick it out, and then the only way is down after that.
I think if we apply what you just said there to your own career,
yeah,
the loan moves were done specifically to stay at Tottenham and always keep the belief that we can stay at Tottenham and play at Tottenham and break into the team there. But the loans were used to keep climbing the ladder, financially and level of club, so that at that point where it was just so obvious that it wasn't going to happen at Tottenham, and we had tried and we knocked on the door and we'd done everything we could, it wasn't going to happen. When you had to make that transfer, you're making it to another Premier League team.
Yeah.
And I think Andros is spot on. Don't leave the building just to jump because someone wants you. You know, you could be 2 injuries away from breaking into that first team. The only time I say leave is if it's quite evident the quality of the player isn't going to break into that first team. And then you do have to find your own way. And it's better to get out of that early and to build up.
Even myself, Marlon, I remember after my loans at Millwall and QPR calling you, I want to go there permanently. Can I go there permanently? And thankfully, between yourself and Daniel Levy, you didn't let it happen, because there's no way I'd be sitting here now as an England international if I'd signed permanently for Millwall in the Championship when I was 19. Yes, I had a good few months, but it was just a purple patch. I could have signed there permanently and it not gone well, and then I'd be one of those lower league players I spoke about before. So yeah, I think the young players as well, they need some guidance from people who can see the bigger picture, like a Marlon or like a chairman at the football club.
Andros, listen, everyone keeps talking about the strength of your character, so I might as well go into it. Because family is important. We're going to do two sides of it, I guess, because we're going to talk about when you go on loan and you have a family of your own and your own children. But also for you, as it was early on in your career, you mentioned you didn't have your own family. You know, having to go into a new environment with new teammates, new manager, new towns, new flat or house every time you're going on loan. What was it like to deal with those changes every 6 months or every year? And how important was your family in terms of giving you support during that period? Or was it Marlon?
Like I said at the start, the toughest part was going into a new club and always having to prove yourself. You got people looking at you, oh, there's the kid from Tottenham. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I hope they think I'm good. I hope I train well. I hope they take to me. And to do that every 6 months like I had was quite tough in a way. But like I said, I always knew the bigger picture. The bigger picture was to work my way up the ladder and eventually get a Premier League loan and play for Spurs. And it worked out that way. But yeah, that sort of side of it's tough because in any walk of life, people always judge you. And yeah, when I went for Yeovil, for example, I was 17. Nobody had heard of me, and it was like my first session. I was the most nervous I've ever been, just hoping that I could show enough that the teammates believed in me. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just hoping that I did enough that the teammates will believe in me and pass me the ball and take to me and include me in their squad. So yeah, that's probably for me, as somebody went on loan with no baggage, that was probably the toughest thing.
You mentioned family, and it is different and difficult for families when the players go on loan, because they could go to the other end of the country and suddenly that means travelling. That means not knowing, you know, if I'm mum or dad, what my boy is eating, sleeping patterns. Is he up all night playing games? So there is stresses, but also it's grounding. You know, the family there to ground the players and make sure that when they go into a new club, they are humble. They have an ability to get on with their teammates, because like Andros said there, it is daunting. When you're going into new teammates, new environments, you don't know how they're going to take to you. I've had one young central defender go on loan to a League One club, and after the first session, the 32-year-old captain who plays in the same position, who potentially the young centre-half is replacing, grabs the player in the changing room straight away. Don't even think about taking my shirt. Don't even think about it. So you're walking into all different emotional environments. You need people around you in your own circle that are going to keep you, you know, in line, and also you can express feelings to, and they can help you through them. And that's where families and agents and people around you come into it.
Andros, I know you haven't got much long left with us, so just on that, did you get mentors at the clubs that you were at? Not intentionally, but were there senior figures who maybe put an arm around you, whether it be a first team coach, maybe someone that you knew from, I don't know, the Spurs Academy, you'd already made a move to one of the clubs you were at? How does it work? Or is it your agent just checking in with you regularly every single day to make sure that you kind of stay on the right path?
That's a very good question. I think my first loan, I was very fortunate that I went on loan with one of my other Spurs teammates, John Abika. We were the same age. We grew up, came through the academy. So we were like each other's mentors, if that makes sense. We kind of helped each other through it. Anything beyond that, no, I don't remember anyone really that kind of.
Cheers, Andros. Cheers, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a Curtis Davies at Birmingham.
Not me looking after my mate that came from my school.
Did.
Yeah, he came from my school. Well. I knew his brothers and all that kind of stuff. And it's all right.
That's crazy.
I'll let that go, mate. It's all right.
That's so
no
crazy.
Props. Yeah. Literally picked him up when we were going back to Birmingham. Would pick him up from his house. Yeah. Wave bye to Troy. Yeah. See you later. All that. Yeah. It's all right, mate. Don't worry. You're right.
Can we start that question? Yeah. No, Curtis is 100% right. But yeah, in the whole, like, you sort of like, once you go to the club, you're treated as a man, you're treated the same as everyone else, as opposed to them looking at you as this academy player who they need to sort of kind of coach through it, if that makes sense.
I think Andros coming into our group is he was young and coming on loan, but we had a few good young players that were in the team. So whilst, like, again, I'm joking about mentoring him and stuff like that, it's like ease him into the building, yes. But if you weren't doing it and someone's having to go at him, I'm not going to be like, no, leave him alone, he's my mate. It's like, no. We've got Nathan Redmond there who's pulling up trees. We've got Jordan Much who's pulling up trees. You need to be on their level because you're the same age as them. And if you're not doing it, they're going to have a go. And that's how he learns. And ultimately, he came in and did a great job for us and helped us get to the playoffs.
Absolutely brilliant. Andros, listen, I know that you're very, very busy, but we really appreciate you joining us. You're probably going to be back on a plane to Turkey very, very shortly, so need to go and catch a flight. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Decision Makers, and best of luck with everything out in Turkey too.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Andros.
Cheers, mate.
So, Curtis, it was great to firstly hear that you were great with Andros when he was at Birmingham City. You're obviously a great guy, as we know. But it's interesting because that personal experience, you've had it in a different way. You know, we speak about the support, teammates, stuff like that, and an agent too. You have gone alone. You had a family at that time, is that right?
Yeah, so but the reason the loan was actually good for me that time is, unfortunately, I'd actually just split up with my ex-partner. So the fact that I was in a bad mental space with, you know, I was at Aston Villa, I was on the verge of my relationship breaking down, and I had no football as an outlet. So mentally, I was struggling with family life wasn't helping my football, and football wasn't helping my family life. So the loan was actually, like I said, the most I've enjoyed football because it was a relief. But in terms of where I went, because my daughter was living in Birmingham and I'm deciding last minute I need to go on loan, it wasn't ripping the Band-Aid off because I was still able to live in the area and therefore commute to Leicester. So it wasn't an issue that side, but it's a totally different thing. And that is the big thing. When it's a permanent move, it's difficult because you're then saying to your family, you know, you have to uproot for potentially 3-4 years, and that's a big thing. But even on the loan move, you know, if your kids are in school and it's like you're not playing, and then the manager signs someone maybe 3 days before deadline day and says, listen, you're not going to be in my plans now, so I think it's best you find yourself a club. You look at yourself and it's like, you know, what do I do? Like, for instance, I had an example of that when Philip Cocu, I'd been speaking to him about, you know, will I be able to go? And he was like, no, we want to have a look, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't in the team. And literally, like, he said to me about a day before transfer deadline day, oh, you can find yourself a loan now. And this is off the back of, I've had an Achilles injury. I've not really played the games. So I'm scrambling. I couldn't find anything. But what happened then is I still hadn't played for another month. And then I was looking at the transfer deadline anywhere else in the world that's open. I said, so I'm looking at loan moves to UAE, to Qatar, and to Australia. They're the three countries that came up that I thought. But I'm there physically looking at these loan moves, thinking, I need to do this to get my football back on track. But then thinking about it, like, if I say to my wife, all right, we can go on loan, yeah, but we're going to go to, don't wrong, she'd probably love it, go to Dubai for a year or go here or there. But, you know, you're moving your family and your young child. Whereas I was selfishly thinking about the football. Where can I play football for now? But if I end up having to drag her across to Australia, even if it's only for 6 months or for whatever, like that's a really mad situation to be in.
I'll come to you and how all of that works last minute, trying to find a loan for your player. But, you know, you're right, you were thinking about the football, but emotionally, what is that like for a player to go home? You've left the training ground. Do you just call your partner immediately and say, we need to find somewhere else? Or has it happened to you previously where another club has come in, it might be 100, 200 miles away, and you say, what can we do about the kids' schools? What can we do about, it might even be at the end of January, so it's halfway through the school year, you know. Can we rent the house out? Maybe we can find ourselves another place. Like, do those conversations happen immediately, or do you think, look, it's my career, I'll speak to my agent, we make the decision, then you tell your partner? How does it all work?
Not with my wife, definitely not. No, like, people seem to think I've stayed in the Midlands because I've had an affinity with the Midlands and my family life. It's just been coincidence that's happened, and it's obviously been a fortunate thing that I haven't had to uproot all the time. But yeah, that's just happened. But in terms of the decision to say sign, when I was leaving Hull to sign for Derby, that was probably the only conscious family decision I'd made, because there were two places I would have gone. I would have gone somewhere closer to London because my eldest daughter lives down there if possible, or as close to Birmingham as possible because my wife was having our first daughter together, and you know, I want to be at a club near her family and stuff like that to help her. And then that came up, and that's the first conscious decision I'd made to go to a Midlands club for my wife. But again, if it came down to a decision where, you know, I'm going to have to uproot and do, you know, a big move, if it's a loan move or whatever, but it's far away, it still has to be the conversation. It couldn't be, listen, and it might break down to, listen, I've not played at Derby, or the manager's not going to play me. I'm going to be miserable. My value's going to go down. Therefore, even though I'm earning X amount now, it's going to be half X next year. What do you want to do? And kind of put it in layman's terms, then you'll get the buy-in. But it can't just be, me and Marlon have made a decision. This is you just pack your bags, you're following me. It can't be that, because, you know, if not, that's unstable for when, if you go on that loan move and then potentially go permanent or something, it ends up being, well, hang on, we were meant to be doing this for 6 months, and it becomes a different conversation.
That's exactly what I was going to say to Marlon. Is there a part of you and maybe the club that's trying to get the player in a loan that says, look, it's 6 months. It's 6 months. You don't have to bring your wife. You don't have to bring your kids. You don't have to change schools, or it might even be 1 year. We'll give you an extra day off. You want to spend an extra day at home, it's fine. You know, whatever it might be to try and make the situation work. Does that happen?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because you're obviously aware that the players have families, and as the agent, you may have, you know, you're friends with their extended family, parents, wives. You'll know them, and you'll also know that taking him away from the family house to the other side of the country is going to cause some issues at home. But that is part of the game, and part of our role and my role is to say, look, you have to go to where the minutes are available. And sitting at home and sitting in the club and not playing is not going to do you the service in the long term. You have to do it. And if it's unpopular, it's unpopular. But those are the conversations you have to have. We had one in the summer where a player was moving from the Midlands to Hull, and the deal was done inside 3 to 4 days toward the end of the window, and the player has to sit down with his wife and his young kid and say, look, I can't take you to football practice because I have to go to Hull. You try explaining that to a 7-year-old at home, they're not going to understand, why is daddy going? But from a football side, it's a necessity. It has to be done. You have to go and play. You have to go and be a footballer. You have to go and play.
To think of actually just saying to, again, when we talk about 7-year-old, my 7-year-old daughter, our daddy's got to do his football, but he has to do his football from, let's just say, Turkey. So I've got a loan move with Andros, and I have to go and do that. But you're not going to come. But I'm going to fly back every couple of weeks and come and see you. You're going to fly out, and trying to explain that to a 7-year-old is just like mind-blowing. And it's heartbreaking, because it's the moment then where they're still processing it. You're okay because they don't really get it. But when you're gone, and then it's like they're crying, they're wanting you, they're wanting their dad, and it's like, oh, but you're stuck there in terms of, not stuck, but you might be playing excellent football and might have revitalised you as a player. But the fact that you've had to leave in the nicest way possible, leave your family in the lurch for a few months, it's still hard to take.
You have to be sympathetic to it. You have to be sympathetic to the player's private life when you're doing the moves. And you have to be open about what that's going to look like. And like I said before, children play a big part in it. And you have to be open. You have to explain what, if a player needs an extra day off, or the club need to find a bigger house so that a family can move, you have to put that into the deal as well.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, I can understand the highly emotive issues when it comes to moving. Particularly, I know it sounds strange, but the shorter term almost sounds like it's harder, because it seems like it's more often that there might be a commute involved. You know, you sign a 5-year deal with someone, it's like, right, we're moving house. And actually, although there is a big upheaval in everyone's lives, you get that kind of level of permanency to it that you don't get with a loan move. So to have a successful loan move, short period of time, what really is key to that? Is it the ability actually to have your family with you? Does that help players in your experience and actually help them with their football on a day-to-day? That ability to keep sleeping in their own bed? Maybe the support of the club that they've gone to and the way that they treat a player that's come in for a short period? Is it your parent club, in fact, having a plan for you when you come back? Look, go for 6 months, focus on your football. Is it what I don't know, but what is it that helps you be successful on loan?
Talking about players and having their family around them, some players would argue they're better without the family around them. And that's bad to say, but in terms of, if they've just had, and it's only for 6 months, so they've just had a newborn, say, and they're getting used to this adaptation of being a father and having to get up early, do the night feeds or whatever to help their wife out. And all of a sudden you rip them from that environment whilst they miss their child, they're actually getting sleep. So they're in this nice hotel where they don't have to wash, they literally just roll out of bed, someone's made your bed by the afternoon, you go back, you do whatever. So even though the family environment might be missed in terms of you miss your kids, actually getting sleep and things like that might help your football. So as much as I like to say players are sympathetic to the situation, some will actually just enjoy the fact of they've got a bit of space to actually get to sleep. But coming back to your point about the permanent move being a little bit more secure, you're signing a long-term deal and you're working it out. It's still difficult because sometimes if you're on a long-term deal and you're going on loan and you think, well, I've still got 2 years left at this club, what happens is if you end up going on another loan and another loan, you've ended up going from, yes, you've got the secure deal here, your family have been in this base that isn't actually your home from where you're from because the kids are in school, but you've been at, let's say, been to Sunderland, then you've been to Cardiff, then you've been to Reading, then you, do you know what I mean? So you've had 3 loans around it, and actually, whilst you're saying, oh, it's only for 6 months, it's now been 18 months that you've been away from your family, and that's the difficult thing to take, where, some players, like I say, get trapped in what they're earning, they can't earn it elsewhere, so they end up having to do that to make ends meet.
For you, what's key to a successful loan?
Define successful loan. I think that's the bigger question, because the reason why I say it is because I go back to a younger player. He will define success by I scored X goals.
Yeah.
I created X. That may not be a successful loan in the long run. The success of that loan is based on his experience within men's environment. If you're a senior player, success on loan has to be minutes, and are you better positioned after that loan than when you first arrived? If you've gone on to loan because you've not been playing and you've still not played, you've in a problem.
I think there was a good thing Tim Sherwood said about Harry Kane. I don't know if he said this on TV or when I was speaking to him personally, but he said Harry Kane, when he went on his loans, he said first few loans were awful in terms of goals, assists. He said, but he'd go and watch him, and he'd be watching him, and he'd say, come back and say, one of the other scouts is saying, Harry didn't have a good time yesterday. Tim's like, I was at the game. It was brilliant. It's like, well, what do you mean? He goes, it's brilliant. He's getting beaten up. He's putting himself about. He's having to learn a different side to his game. So when he comes back here, he's still going to be the finisher that Harry Kane is. He's still going to be the sharp, in and around the box player that Harry Kane is. But he's going to be robust. He's just been beaten up by a guy for 90 minutes, like week in, week out when he's on loan at Millwall or whatever. Said so whilst, again, if Harry Kane comes out of that thinking, in a whirlwind, thinking, oh gosh, but actually Tim Sherwood saw the value of it, that yes, he's been beaten up for 90 minutes, but that's going to be invaluable when it comes to the games where he's not, because he's going to use his physicality, he's going to use his strength more than he ever did before.
We before Harry went to Millwall, we went to watch a game. We went to watch Millwall. We sat in the stands, watched the game, and it was if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
On that physicality, and that was one of the reasons why Harry went there. I think if you talk about negative loans, you look at Leicester. I think Harry's gone on record to say that the Leicester loan, again, on paper, wasn't a success in terms of minutes and numbers. Actually, he learnt more about himself and the ability to be patient and the ability to self-believe and to keep pushing from that loan. So again, that was a successful loan because he took something from it, and that's the bottom line. You have to, as a player, whether results go for you or go against you, you have to take something from each loan experience. And those little lessons are what's going to put you instead moving forward.
Final point then on it, and we will talk about finances in football in one of the upcoming episodes, but we know that kind of there are more constraints on football clubs financially, particularly down the pyramid. Do you see that loans in particularly English football will be more important for football clubs, more important for player development than they ever have been, given a short-term deal might be the best value that a club can get in the market right now?
I think there's a big trend towards these loans with obligations and And it's a way of a player coming in and maybe the club not being able to afford that player immediately, but having an agreement whereby the player comes in and we will pay for him should he kick on or hit a certain number of games, or if it's an absolute permanent, it kicks in at a later date, allows them to fund that transfer almost 12 months down the line.
Yeah, I think that's one level to it. And the other side is, as we already alluded to, is the fact that lower league clubs, actually buying players doesn't happen anymore. Most players are pulled in on frees. You're looking at, if you're in League One or League Two, who's getting released from the Championship at the end of the year, or who's getting released from League One, whatever, trying to pick up what's going to be available for free and then utilise what you've got in your wage budget. Whereas, again, a loan of a player from a Tottenham or from a Chelsea or from a wherever, Man City, wherever, they're likely to help you out if they're playing their minutes. And that's usually the structure of the contract. If they're playing 70% of the minutes, then we'll pay all their wages, that kind of. So when you get that kind of freebie that comes to you, it is a big thing. But it's the other side of it where, yes, Man City or Chelsea or whoever have protected their player by he's going to play the minutes and therefore he's going to hold his value. So us sending him out, he's now got, if we use Doyle as an example, that's at Norwich right now, he's had 3 loan moves where he's now played over 100 games on loan in the EFL. Now, his value now, even though he's never kicked a ball for Man City, 8 to 10 million, do you reckon? Possibly?
Yeah, he's been pretty good.
Just a good young left-footed centre-half, or left-back, wherever you want to play him.
And that pedigree is kind of an extra value at the moment. He was in Manchester City's academy, seems to add a couple of million at the moment.
But that's it. So from him never playing for Man City, but having all these loans where City are like, yeah, we'll take a bit of a hit on his wages, he's actually got a value where they could just sell him right now when he's never kicked a ball from. So I think that is the route forward, that lower clubs aren't going to be able to pay. Higher clubs are always going to have a surplus of players, be it in the 21s or in their first team squad, that need to get out and get the minutes, but also just to hold their value.
It goes into the planning of squads. If you're League One, League Two, you have your core group of players, and you automatically leave 5 spaces where I'm going to supplement my core squad with players that we either couldn't afford the wages, we couldn't afford the transfer fees, but we're going to supplement that core with 5 good loans. And that goes into the planning on day one of a transfer window.
I think, it's just fascinating, the fact that this thing in football has been so strong, and I think actually will get stronger over the coming years. And you might have a superstar coming to your team in the coming seasons. And
I just want to finish on one thing for me. I'm so strongly about not seeing players rest and stay in the 21s for an extended period. For me, to push a player and push a client out on loan early, get them exposed to men's football, get them, you used the word robust before, correct, but just get them at the intensity to understand it. That is so important for long-term success for a player. Sitting and coasting in the 21s is great to a certain point. At 17, 18, you're ready to go out.
Yeah.
But and this is where we have the problem with some clubs. They like winning the under-21s league, or they like winning stuff. And
I personally think that there should be a mandatory number of loans for EFL clubs, and I think that we need almost a financial model with the people that run football, the FA, the EFL, the Premier League, that says each club, it's almost like the MLS where they get a designated player. It's like you've got 2 slots, and a Premier League club is going to give you a player, 2 players for a year, or 2 Premier League clubs will give you a player for a year, and you can use them at your will, obviously. Try and get the ones that you want, but I actually think there should be more of an emphasis from the top down in football that we're sending players on loan earlier, because I just think it has helped so many players.
Look, for me, the loan system for me is a massive benefit. We always push players to go on loan when possible, and I think if you look back over history, there's so many players that have been on successful loans as part of their story, and you forget about it. I mean, everyone forgets David Beckham went on loan. Anthony Gordon went on loan to Preston. And maybe, again, they weren't successes on the day, but look at those players now. They're better for those experiences. So sitting in the 21s for me, no. Yeah,
but I honestly do believe that it needs to go back to being able to go on loan at any time in terms of for an under 21 player. Yeah. I think if it's not, I'm not saying, you should be able to sign this 28-year-old that's played 500 games because you've had an injury. I think if it's an under 21 player, I think they should be allowed to go on a month's loan, whatever, at any time still, and not be the restriction on it. Because for me, like I say, if you're a player that thinks you're going to be close to that first team, and on August 29th, they sign so-and-so in your position, which means now you're not second choice, you're third choice, and you're now facing a whole 3 months until the January window. Literally, you're not going to be in the first team, you're going to be in the 21s. I think it's a key thing, because I was at Derby as well, and talking about people playing 23s or 21s, whatever, but we had a team that wanted to win the 21s Premier League, which is gravitas for the club and their academy, yes, but actually of those players in that 21s team that won that league, how many of them actually got into the first team? Loads of them are now going out to find a career in football at 22, having earned, a nice first year pro contract for the last 3 years, whatever. But they're going out and they're trying to build a career in non-league, and even at non-league, they're saying, well, hang on, you've played 2 games and you're 22. It's a minefield, and it's something that they need to make sure that they get right.
Real lesson in there for young players, parents of young players as well, about what can happen for your child or yourself in terms of your development on loan, right? Massively important. So interesting to delve into it with you, of course, mid-20s, not mid-career. We know you went on and on and on. And Andros, who's got the world record for going on loan as well, who joined us, Andros Townsend, a little bit earlier on. Gentlemen, thank you once again for being with me on the Decision Makers podcast, and to all of you as well. Really appreciate you being with us. Remember, you can follow us on social media. You'll find the details in the description. If you're enjoying the podcast, then please do subscribe. You won't miss a single episode. Leave a review if you like it. Make sure you share it too with friends that you think that might be interested. And remember, we'll be back very, very soon with another incredibly interesting episode discussing scouting and data with the former Tottenham technical director, Steve Hitchens. So stay tuned for that one. We'll see you soon.